The public should have the right to do whatever they want with the software they use, and come close to owning it even. This is a right given by the license, and much of the open source software that people use daily is under, and it should be a right the end user must refuse to go without. Yup, in this video we're talking about what is essentially software communism. Yep, we're going that controversial. Irrelevant of what you think of physical, non-digital communism, in this video we're going to be talking about why digital communism, to exaggerate slightly, is a good idea. So sit down, relax, and get ready, because that's what we're talking about right now on Linux Lounge. Indeed, in this video we're talking about why you should insist on having right over or ownership of the software you use, or the digital means of production if you prefer. Now, first I should clear up what exactly I mean by owning software and what I mean by the digital means of production. What I mean by owning is actually owning a piece of software. What I don't mean is having a license to use a piece of software. It is a significant difference. For example, if you buy a copy of Windows, you don't own that or have the right to use it necessarily. Microsoft can pretty much revoke your license whenever they like, and that does happen. People who have replaced too many components in their computer will be more than familiar with this when Windows refuses to work anymore. No, instead, what I mean by owning a piece of software is something like a Linux distro, for example. If I download a copy of Debian and the developers of that software want to stop me using it, they can't. So although there are rules around that piece of software, more or less I do own that. I can share it, I can modify it, I can use it however I see fit, more or less, and I can redistribute it. So for most intents and purposes, that is software that I own, essentially. That's not something that can be said for Windows and other proprietary programs. Of course, those are just examples, and the same thing applies to many other programs. Now, to explain the second term I use, the digital means of production. Much like in communist theory, the means of production simply means, the means by which something else is created, usually of financial value. Now, in communist theory, that would refer to factories, tools, and other things. By digital means of production, I mean pretty much any program that's used to create something else. So, for example, the average person might be using an Office program that they use to create documents, or perhaps an image editor they use to edit family photos, for example. For a creative professional, that things start to become a lot more significant. The digital means of production for them might be, for example, the video editing program they use, or the photo editors that they make a living from, for example. If you want to take this idea to its extreme, every program that you use could be considered the digital means of production. Even your operating system and hardware, for example. None of the other digital means of production would be run without them, after all. Now, first, to understand why owning the digital means of production is important, let's talk about what happens when you don't own the digital means of production. Put simply, if you don't own the software you're using, the company that does own it has the right to exploit you however they want and infringe on your freedoms, and can, in the worst case scenario, end your rights to use that software. And in many cases, that software might be necessary to you. This isn't some theoretical situation either, it has happened before. For example, Adobe has stopped the entire country of Venezuela from using its software and has entirely cancelled subscriptions to Adobe's Creative Cloud, which means any creative professionals in Venezuela have been left totally out of luck and maybe even out of a job. Had these people used open source software, no company would ever have the right to stop their usage of software. Sure, that company could stop updating the software or even render it useless through an update or something if they really wanted to. But if that software is truly freedom respecting, the user would have the right to keep using an older version of the software, or keep using it after updates have ceased, or even fork the software and continue providing support for it themselves. Another example that a lot of people watching this video might be familiar with is Windows. If you change too much hardware, sometimes your license will just stop working, forcing you to buy a new one and leaving you unable to get work done until you cough up the cash to Microsoft. Other things that can happen as a consequence of not owning the digital means of production are consequences of proprietary software generally. These consequences are as a result of the company who develops the software being free to exploit you however they wish. They can spy on you, sell your data, restrict how you use the software, and do several other malicious things. Bear in mind that all of these consequences can indeed have dire effects. If, for example, your primary source of income comes from the Adobe Creative Cloud and they decide to stop providing service to you, then you're out of business until you can find and learn something else. If you use Microsoft Office to do all your documents, well, you can't do that if Microsoft decides to terminate your service. And if you use Windows or Mac OS and either Microsoft or Apple decides you can't use that software, then your computer is out of action until you can get another license. Well, now we've talked about the doom and gloom of not owning the digital means of production, let's talk about what's good about owning the digital means of production. What are the advantages to the creator and the average user? Well, all of the advantages really boil down to freedom. You can use your software however you want, whenever you want, and for whatever reason you want. No company can infringe on your freedoms or your rights to use the software. Your workflow can never be interrupted by a company. If you, for example, use Kdenlive, KDE can't just stop providing the software to you in your entire country. If they try, someone is sure to fork and redistribute it. If you own the digital means of production, forking that software and redistributing it is totally okay because the GNU license allows it, which is something that a proprietary license would never allow, which just goes to show that if you use proprietary software, you don't own that. Additionally, because you own the software, you're free to do whatever you want with it. You can even modify the code to fit your workflow if you want. If, for example, a program that you use doesn't support a feature that you want, if you know how to code, you can feel free to add that feature in yourself, and the license permits that. You're even free to redistribute that modified code to the community. All of those freedoms go to show just how restricted you are with proprietary means of production, how you do not truly own that. Now finally, let's discuss how you can take back the digital means of production and start truly owning your software. Put simply, you can start looking into free and open source software alternatives to programs that you use daily to create various things. Now, keep in mind, this isn't an all or nothing type situation. You don't have to start using Linux or some other open source operating system and entirely open source software overnight, but instead make small changes. For example, if you use Microsoft Office to make simple documents, consider moving over to LibreOffice, as realistically you're not going to lose much. If you make simple videos and use a proprietary editing program, consider moving to Kdenlive or some other open source video editor and beginning to learn that. If you, for example, use Photoshop to make simple sketches, consider trying out Krita or the GNU image manipulation program. I could go on, but my point is, if you can swap to a program that is open source and freedom respective, it's definitely worth trying. And over time, you can start moving more and more of your software over to open source alternatives and truly begin to take back your digital means of production.